Good morning, everyone, and welcome. On behalf of the Massachusetts Business Alliance for Education and the Rennie Center for Education Research and Policy, I'd like to thank you all for joining us at this, the second in a series of 3 forums to examine the implementation of the Common Core state standards in Massachusetts. My name is Henry Dinger. I chair the Board of Directors of MBAE, and I'm an attorney at Goodwin, Proctor in Boston. These forums are possible thanks to the generosity of Fidelity Investments, Intel, the Nellie Mae Education Foundation, and the Evaluation Systems Group of Pearson, and we are very, very grateful to all of them for their support. At our first session in February, a distinguished panel of educators and state officials discussed what it will take to develop curricula and instructional methodologies to implement the Common Core. Today we turn our attention to the critical question of assessments. But before we look forward, it may be helpful to spend a few minutes looking back. The first stage in the 1993 education reform was the articulation of high, rigorous standards that reflected our collective best judgment as to what children in Massachusetts needed to master to compete at a high level in a global economy and to participate in our society as thoughtful, critical citizens. The Commonwealth developed a set of curriculum frameworks to that end, and by all accounts, the resulting frameworks were of high quality and articulated in detail a body of knowledge and a set of skills that went a considerable way toward meeting the ambitious goals of the reform. But the drafters of the Education Reform Act recognized very clearly that high-quality standards required equally high-quality tools to measure whether and to what extent students met or fell short of those standards. Without such assessment tools, the education system flies blind. And if those assessments had not carried significant consequences for both students and educators, one wonders whether those high standards would have been taken seriously. And so the Commonwealth developed MCAS. Although MCAS generated and still generates considerable controversy, we believe the combination of high standards and MCAS must be considered at least a qualified success. Massachusetts students as a whole rank at the top of many national and some international measures of student achievement. But there is still much to be done. Massachusetts faces chronic racial and socioeconomic achievement gaps that remind us that our success has not reached every child. Just one example. A recent study by the U.S. Department of Education found only 41% of the lowest income students are graduating from 4-year colleges as compared to a 67% rate for the highest income students. Moreover, success as compared to other states is not enough. Our children will compete not only with their peers from Miami and Chicago, but also with young people in Berlin and Beijing and Mumbai. Moreover, for all its virtues, and they are many, there is an important sense in which MCAS does not attempt to answer the right question. The right question is whether students leaving public schools in Massachusetts are ready for college and career. MCAS does not purport to answer that question. MCAS measures basic skills. It was not intended to be an indicator of readiness for post-secondary level work, and it does not measure that. Each year, about a third of our students who have passed MCAS and are admitted to Massachusetts public colleges need to take remedial courses before qualifying for placement in classes where they will earn credit toward graduation. An ACT study found that 91% of high school teachers believe students are graduating from high school ready to do college-level work. Yet only 26% of college educators agree. 3 out of 4 college teachers believe that students arrive on campus unprepared. Similarly, employers lament the lack of work readiness skills they see in job applicants and employees at every level of educational attainment. So while Massachusetts may have the best average test scores in the nation, we still haven't gotten it quite right. Before MBAE was prepared to endorse the Common Core state standards, we commissioned a thorough, non-ideological comparison of the current Massachusetts standards and the Common Core to assess whether adoption of the Common Core would move us forward. This study, conducted by WestEd, an independent national education research agency, found that there is more in common than not between Massachusetts' current academic standards and the Common Core. And more importantly, both sets of standards are high. With substantial alignment in math and English and comparable clarity and rigor, the Common Core can be assessed with at least the same reliability and validity as our current MCAS-based assessment system. We also examined how the two sets of standards compared in areas where we know our students need to do better. WestEd found that the Common Core placed a greater emphasis on standards that focus on strategic thinking, and that this focus begins in earlier grades. The Common Core also favors depth rather than breadth, and includes standards for literary skills in areas other than literature. The Common Core will encourage the development of skills in understanding and communicating technical information, and the kinds of arguments made in the political arena. Assessment tools that measure achievement of these skills will bring us closer to answering the right questions than MCAS currently does. The challenge of implementing the Common Core state standards and of developing tools to measure their achievement presents Massachusetts with an exciting opportunity for collaboration and innovation. MBAE and the Rennie Center are hosting these forums to help meet that challenge. We are pleased to bring together some outstanding speakers this morning. Sandra Boyd and Wanda Monthi will explain what each of the state-led consortia are doing to develop effective assessments. Mike Petrilli will share his views about what comes next. How will future revisions and adjustments to the standards be governed? And we are particularly pleased to have with us Jim Pizer to moderate the panel, and Boston Superintendent Carol Johnson to give us her perspective on assessing the Common Core. But first, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Mitchell Chester, Commissioner of Education and Secondary Education in Massachusetts, who will begin the program. He is no stranger to most of you, since he has been Commissioner since May in 2008. He came to us from the Ohio Department of Education, where he held a number of senior positions. Commissioner Chester also served as the Executive Director for Accountability and Assessment for the School District of Philadelphia from 1997 to 2001. Before that, he was Chief of the Bureau of Curriculum and Instructional Programs of the Connecticut State Department of Education. He has been a teacher, assistant principal, and curriculum coordinator in 3 school districts, and we are delighted to have him join us today. Commissioner?
Good morning. So now I'm confused. How many of you read the Globe? How many of you read the Globe this morning? Yeah, because I thought I was here to talk about outdated food. All right. So I have to switch gears a little bit. Thanks for the opening remarks, Henry, and thanks to the sponsors that Henry mentioned, and in particular, thanks to MBAE. I know Linda Noonan is here. Thanks to the Rennie Center, and Jill's here, for bringing some really high-quality policy discussions to us here in Massachusetts. I want to offer some opening remarks to frame our thinking, my thinking, as we adopted the Common Core standards, as we're participant and in a leadership role for the Partnership for the Assessment of Readiness for College and Career, and then in particular on how we deliver on a promise of a high-quality, world-class education for all of our students, an education that, in fact, prepares them for opportunities after high school. I'm not going to revisit the whole history of the adoption of the Common Core standards. They were not unanimously endorsed among the folks who were really concerned about us adopting them as the Pioneer Institute. I don't know if anybody's here from the Pioneer Institute. But as I looked at the evidence across all of the studies that I could see, which included the MBAE study, which included bringing together our own educators, committees of our own educators from Massachusetts, K-12 educators as well as higher educators, it was clear to me that the preponderance, the vast preponderance of evidence was that the Common Core state standards, in fact, were at least as good as the Massachusetts standards, and in some ways substantially stronger, were a step forward for us. And it was on that basis that I recommended their adoption, and the State Board did, in fact, adopt them. If you haven't looked at the standards, I'll just highlight two areas where I think they've really kind of will carry us forward in Massachusetts. One is in the area of literacy demands across the curriculum, reading and writing across the curriculum, where I think the Common Core state standards are a substantial step forward advancement for guiding our districts, our schools, as they implement curriculum, making sure that students and that our curriculum does a lot more than simply focus on personal narrative. I mean, we get consistent feedback from employers, from higher ed, that if there's one place where our high school graduates too often show up not well prepared, it's being able to handle the reading and writing demands of a college level curriculum and of an employer. In math, highlight one area. We've long been concerned about the number of students who end up in an algebra class, whether that starts in 8th grade, whether that starts in 9th grade, unprepared for success in algebra. The courses where students fail the greatest are 9th grade math and English. And so what the Common Core standards provides is a learning progression, a curriculum progression in the grades leading up to algebra, whether districts offering algebra in 8th grade or in 9th grade, that I think is a major advancement in preparing students for success in that way. But we know that standards alone, simply having a document that articulates academic expectations, by itself is not sufficient. And as Henry said, one of the main reasons that we've moved the needle so far in Massachusetts is not only do we have an outstanding set of standards, but we have an outstanding assessment, end-of-year assessment, our MCAS assessment. So when it came to thinking about a new assessment system that would be commensurate with these new standards, states came together, and ultimately around two state consortia. One is the consortia to which Massachusetts has committed, the PARCC, P-A-R-C-C, Partnership for the Assessment of Readiness for College and Career. Doesn't exactly trip off the tongue, but that is the name of it. The other assessment, and you know, we in PARCC suffer from a bit of an inferiority complex because the other assessment is known by the name, this is the truth, Smarter Balanced Assessment Consortium. So by implication, if you're not in the Smarter Balanced Assessment Consortium, it makes you wonder, you know, not as smart, not quite as balanced. So we're working on it. We're working on it, but we're trying to get past that. So from the start, I've said in conversations that I was in when this was just a germ of an idea, and then when states came together around crafting a proposal to the federal government, I said that for Massachusetts, we were not interested in participating in an assessment development project that was simply going to build us another end of year assessment. We have an excellent end of year assessment. We have one that sets a high bar, and we don't need to spend our time on something that's just going to replicate what we have. So for us, it needed to be a next generation assessment. It needed to be an assessment that expanded our ambitions around assessment, that did not lower the bar at all for us. And I know there's a lot of concern about bringing a consortium of states around the table and maintaining a high bar and not ending up going to the least common denominator or some kind of compromise. But I've been insistent from the start that it has to be not only next generation, but a high bar. What does next generation mean? And you're going to hear more from Sandy in a few minutes about the architecture of this, so I'm not going to say a lot, but I'll highlight 3 areas. One is that the design calls for not only a more traditional end-of-year assessment component to this system, but in addition, some what are being referred to as through course, some mid-year assessments that are more open-ended, more performance-based assessments that will challenge students to demonstrate their abilities around the kinds of tasks that are not easily assessed in a 1 or 2 hour sit down and take this test kind of format. So you could envision, for example, students having to do a research project over several days' time where there's a limited selection of texts that they have to access and read and synthesize information from as a kind of task that might be included in that. A second focus in the Park assessment, and Henry referenced this in his comments. It is very clearly identifying a college and career certification, the readiness for college and career. This assessment system that we're designing will go up through 11th grade. We'll have a very rigorous validation process that involves our higher ed institutions so that students who score at a particular level on this assessment, our universities would have a pretty confident indicator of whether or not those students are in fact ready for college and or career readiness. And then finally, the consortium is dedicated to not just making this an assessment activity, but to scaffolding support at the state level for improving curriculum and instruction. So there's a number of activities in that regard which I think are equally critical, and I hope Sandy mentions those as she gives you her remarks. So we've got good standards. We're aiming at building an assessment that's going to carry us forward and not take us backward. But I would argue that that's still not enough. I would argue that one of the things that we've learned from standards-based reform over the last couple of decades is that having good assessments, having good standards, having assessments that have fidelity to those standards is part of the picture, but it's not sufficient. It's necessary, but it's not sufficient. And I think our achievement gaps in the Commonwealth are a testimony to that. That for too many schools and too many districts, the ability to deliver a course of study, to develop curriculum commensurate with those standards, falls short. And that as a result, what I've carved out is a more deliberate state role from the state education agency in supporting district efforts to improve curriculum and instruction. And that state role is very much outlined in our Race to the Top application. So if you look at Massachusetts' Race to the Top application, you'll see a number of areas where we've dedicated resources in our Race to the Top budget to supporting districts to transition to the new standards. We've now adopted new frameworks in English language arts and mathematics that are customized to Massachusetts but that incorporate the Common Core state standards. We've already started sessions around the state, offered regionally around the state, to make sure our districts understand what the new standards call for and have the tools to do a gap analysis, an analysis of where the curriculum in that district is at this point in time and what the new standards, the new curriculum frameworks call for, and understanding that gap. Then we have a substantial investment in this budget to developing resources for districts and teachers, resources in the form of curriculum tools, lesson plans, units, performance assessments that you can embed in the course of your curriculum. And then finally, the final piece that I would highlight, which I think is going to be very much a curriculum and instruction improvement tool, is our approach to human capital that we've outlined in our Race to the Top application. You may be aware the piece that's out of the blocks first is the teacher evaluation component of that strategy. That's a much broader strategy than only teacher evaluation and administrator evaluation. But we've had a task force at work. They delivered a set of recommendations to me and to the State Board of Education last month in March. And in a couple of weeks, at the April meeting of the State Board of Education, I will present my recommendations around teacher evaluation, administrator evaluation. And I think of this as a very powerful, really potentially a game changer for Massachusetts in terms of thinking about curricular and instructional improvement. It's interesting to me that in most of our districts, that student performance is divorced from issues of evaluation of teachers and administrators. And it seems to me that that's absurd. I mean, the heart of our enterprise is about supporting student learning, promoting student learning, and to say that evidence around student performance should not be part of the picture makes no sense to me whatsoever. So you'll see my recommendations in this regard. You saw an endorsement in the task force report for making student performance count, but you'll see more specifically in my recommendations how that would take place and how that would be part of a system of support for educator development. Because it's not, for me, primarily about sorting and shedding people, right? That will happen. But the main event here for the majority of our staff is improvement, is providing the kind of feedback and the kind of opportunities for them to grow to be as good as they can be. So I'm very excited about this agenda. I think this is a time of unprecedented opportunity in this nation. I think we've positioned Massachusetts well, and it's the work that many of you in this room have done for the last 2 decades. To put us in a position to take advantage of this moment in time. And it's ironic that it comes at a moment when we're experiencing a tremendous fiscal downturn. But nonetheless, I'm really energized by the opportunity in front of the Commonwealth here. Again, grateful to folks for to the Rennie Center and to MBAE for sponsoring this. And I think I have the pleasure of introducing your moderator for today, Jim Pizer, who I've gotten to know since coming to Massachusetts. Jim's very much been a key architect and a key proponent of the success that Massachusetts has enjoyed in the last 2 decades. I think of him as a tremendous resource, not just nationally, but to the Commonwealth as well. Someone who I try to intersect with to learn from. And Jim, I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you.